Yeah? Hey, how you doing? Am I speaking to a Mr. Tomic? It's Tomsick. Yeah, whatever. I heard you do movie reviews. Yeah. Well, I sometimes do a little movies on the side. I don't give a shit. Yeah, okay. Hello everybody and welcome to today's review of The Irishman. It is the new film directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, and Anna Paquin for about 10 minutes of screen time and 7 words of dialogue. So, this film is based on the novel I Heard You Paint Houses, which tells the story of Frank Sheeran, played by De Niro, who is a truck driver turned hitman who works for crime bosses like Russell Bufalino, played by Joe Pesci in the movie, and it also deals with his friendship with Jimmy Hoffa, a very powerful union leader who is very connected with the mafia and then one day suddenly disappeared. And this movie kind of alleges that Frank Sheeran is kind of responsible for his disappearance. So this movie is an epic about this one guy who slowly works his way up the ladder in the criminal underworld, killing people and making connections with politicians and other powerful people, only to lose his humanity and his family in the end. So Martin Scorsese is back doing what he does best. Gangster movies. And he's done a couple in the past. He's done Goodfellas, he's done Casino, and The Departed, which he won an Oscar for. So yeah, this film is pretty much up his alley. The ensemble in this movie is just so great. Every actor in this movie was well cast. Robert De Niro obviously headlines this movie, and he's very skillful in this role, although he kind of felt one-noted the whole time. My favorite performance of this whole movie was by far Al Pacino. This guy stole the movie. Every single scene he's in, he shines. Al Pacino, of course, plays Jimmy Hoffa, and my God, this guy, wow. This guy just has a big mouth and he never knows when to shut up. And he doesn't have a filter, which kind of gets him in trouble in the end. Wow. Al Pacino was by far the greatest part of this whole movie. But there's also another performance that stands out in this movie. Whereas Pacino jumps off the page with his high energy, there's one actor with such subdued energy. Joe Pesci has worked with Martin Scorsese before. He's been in Raging Bull, he's been in Goodfellas, he's been in Casino, and Martin Scorsese actually had to bring the guy out of retirement so that he could do this movie. And I'm so glad he did, because he was perfect. He plays another gangster in this movie, Russell Bufalino, but this is totally different. This guy is more level-headed. He doesn't go off crazy. He's actually very quiet. It only adds to the malevolence of his character. And he never loses his temper. Not once. Not once. And that's because he never takes anything personal. It's all business to him. And he keeps it that way. He knows how to keep it that way. This guy just knows the rules of the mafia. He's also a very down-to-earth and very principled man. Well, maybe I shouldn't say principled because he does have a lot of people killed. I mean, if you cross this guy, he knows people and he knows how to get things done. So he's a very dangerous man. And plus, in contrast, despite being a criminal, he really does have a gentle heart. He's friends with Frank Sheeran. He cares about the man deeply and for his family. There's one scene where they're at a bowling alley with the whole family, and at one point he expresses how Frank is lucky to have children because he's always wanted to have kids, but he and his wife are not able to. Joe Pesci displays such vulnerability in this one moment. As a man who always wanted kids, whenever he tries to connect with Frank's children, he's always met with fear. And he's disappointed, but all he has to say is, "That's okay. That's fine." Man, that was heartbreaking. It is probably the best masterclass of subtle acting that I have seen since Casey Affleck in Manchester by the Sea. Seriously, there's nothing like it. Okay, now let's talk about the de-aging bit. So Scorsese really wanted these actors, but the problem is, these guys are old. And the fact is, they have to play characters that span from their 40s to their 80s. So basically, these actors had to act half their age for the first half of the movie. So what they had to do was they had to CGI their faces in a way that makes them look younger. For the most part, it looked good. But here's the thing. When you get older, your body gets weaker, it becomes slower, your voice gets raspier, and that was pretty evident throughout. I mean, despite their efforts, you cannot hide their age with the CGI. Not at all. I mean, you can totally read it in their body language. I mean, when you see these guys walking around, they're not walking like 40-year-olds. They're walking like people who have arthritis or are suffering from hemorrhoids. There was no agility to their movements, at least in the first hour and a half. The second half of the movie, they're pretty much acting their age. But the first half, I mean, whenever they get into fight scenes, like say when Al Pacino had to beat someone up, you could totally tell they were using a stunt double. His hands were different, his hair was different. I mean, you can just tell that just how they were moving so much faster. I mean, the guy can't do it himself. He's 79. There was one scene where Robert De Niro had to beat up a grocer, and it was so stiff. I mean, the guy doesn't put enough energy or force into beating this guy up. I give credit to that guy who had to pretend that he was getting beat up by an old man who is trying to play 40. It looked so fake. I felt so sorry for him. I mean, come on, Marty. I mean, I've always said that Raging Bull had the fakest fight choreography in a movie, but I take that back. Irishman tops that. Also, the runtime. It is 3.5 hours long. Quite a long movie. But here's the thing. This is supposed to be an epic. And Frank Sheeran had to go through so many steps in order to achieve the status that he eventually did. In the Mafia, there are so many connections. So many that sometimes it felt necessary to address them all. I mean, sure, they could have made some stuff up, you know, simplified the story a little bit, you know, just to make the runtime a little bit shorter. But I appreciated how Martin Scorsese was trying to tell this story to the fullest. I mean, if you were watching this in theaters, you'd probably have a lot of pee breaks. If you walked out of the theater, you'd probably miss some important information. So it's a good thing this movie's on Netflix. And I'm actually surprised that a guy like Scorsese actually, you know, relied on Netflix to bring this story to life. I mean, filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg would oppose that idea. But now that he's done it, well, we'll see where the others go. In the end, I'd say this was a pretty well done movie. I mean, there's nothing new here. We've seen all these tropes before in other mob movies. I mean, you have the guy, he tells his story through narration, and you know, you see how he goes from here to here, how, you know, the criminal world takes a toll on him, and he starts to live a life of either regrets or, you know, I don't know. But I'd say The Irishman is a very well-made film, made by a fantastic director who never lost his touch. But it's nothing new. Still good though. So I'm gonna give it an A-. Hey, thanks for watching my video, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be seeing you around.